So in this video, we're going to be talking about the different types of real numbers. So we're going to start with the basic numbers. When you're really little and you first start learning to count, you learn to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. These are what we call the natural numbers, or our counting numbers. Then we get a little bit older and we learn about the word, or the number rather, 0. Now the number 0 takes all of the natural numbers and the number 0, and they become what we call whole numbers. Then we get a little bit older and we start learning about negative numbers. Now these negative numbers are just like the counting numbers, but they're opposites. So the integers are made up of all of the whole numbers and all of the counting numbers too, and all the negative numbers. Then we have rational numbers. So rational numbers are decimals that repeat. That's what that line is right there. That means repeating. So repeating decimals, or even decimals that end. So you could just have a decimal like 0.25, and that would also be considered a rational number. And then fractions. All fractions are considered rational numbers. And so rational numbers are made up of the natural counting numbers, whole numbers, integers, and rational numbers. Then there's one more type of family. And this family is kind of like the outcast, you could say, because it's all by itself. It's called the irrational numbers. Irrational numbers. So irrational numbers are not natural, not whole numbers, not integers. They are numbers like pi or radical 2. Decimals that don't repeat, but they go on for forever. So if I had 0.1379826 and it just kept going but never repeated, that would be considered an irrational number. All of these types of numbers make up what we call the real numbers. Let's practice working with those a little bit. So if we look here, we've got some examples to look at. So I want you to try and list 5 natural numbers, and then 3 rational numbers, 5 whole numbers, 3 irrational numbers, and 5 integers. So go ahead and pause the video and give that a try. And your numbers might not look exactly like mine when we come back, but we can talk about them and see if your numbers would work as well. Okay, so the list of natural numbers that I picked was 13, 15, 17, 20, 100, and 192. I just picked numbers that someone could count to. So if you just pick numbers that someone could count to that were positive and whole numbers, then you're good. Okay, and so for rational numbers, I picked 2/3 and 1.5656 repeating, and negative 2.5. So if you made a fraction or a decimal that repeats or a decimal that ends, whether it's positive or negative, then you pick numbers that are considered rational numbers. Let's check our whole numbers. So for whole numbers, I picked 7, 3, 0, 83, and 21. So if you pick numbers that you could count to that were whole numbers, or the number 0, then those are whole numbers. Let's check our irrational numbers. So for my irrational numbers, I picked the square root of 5, and then the decimal 3.2978, and it kept going but did not repeat, and the square root of 13. So if you picked the square root of a non-perfect square, or you picked a decimal that goes on for forever but doesn't repeat, those are irrational numbers. Now you should know that if you pick the square root of 4, that won't work because the square root of 4 is actually 2, which is a whole number, it's an integer, it's a natural number, but it is not a rational number. Let's check our 5 integers. So for integers, I chose negative 15, 7, 0, 3, and negative 8. So if you chose a positive or a negative number that was a whole number, or the number 0, then you picked 5 integers. Hope this helps.